What's up everybody, this is Danny and this is the new 13-inch MacBook Pro, but this is the super spec'd out version with the 10th generation quad-core i7, 32GB of RAM. What I want to do is take that and compare it with my 16-inch MacBook Pro. This is a Core i9, 8-core, 64GB of RAM, and let's be real, we all wanted that 14-inch MacBook Pro, but it didn't happen, and with all of the leaks, it looks like it might not even happen until next year. So let's take a look at the most powerful MacBook 13-inch that you can buy versus the most powerful 16-inch that you can buy. I want to help you make a buying decision between the two if you were thinking about wanting a smaller form factor. Let's take a look at all the major differences that you need to know about, and then we'll have some fun with some performance testing. The obvious difference here is size. You would think that they wouldn't be this different, but it's definitely noticeable. They are both made of this same beautiful aluminum, but there's a huge difference in size and weight. 3.1 pounds versus 4.3 pounds. Thank goodness that the keyboards are improved on both of them. The 13-inch now has the improved Magic Keyboard that the 16 got last year, so much better. You get the inverted arrow keys, the escape key is back, the travel is better, tactility is there, so the keyboards on both are excellent with Touch ID and the love it or hate it touch bar. The bigger size on the 16-inch gives you two major advantages on day-to-day use. Both trackpads are oversized and basically the best in the business, but the 16-inch is noticeably bigger, and the size of the speakers on the 16-inch are also much larger, and the 13-inch does have improved speakers and they sound great, but take a listen. When you compare them, you can definitely tell the difference, especially on depth. When it comes to ports, they both have 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, 2 on each side, so you aren't missing out when it comes to connectivity. For the most part, I've moved to USB-C, but I still use a USB-C hub every single day. The one I've been using lately is from the channel sponsor Anchor. The Power Expand Direct does take up 2 ports, but it's totally worth it. You get 7 total ports, including Thunderbolt 3 that can charge up to 100 watts, so you're completely fine for the 16-inch MacBook Pro that demands more power. 2 USB 3.0, an additional USB-C port, a micro SD card, and a full-size SD card slot, which is much needed for us content creators. There's also an HDMI port just in case you need it on the road or even at home. The build quality is great and it matches so well with the space gray finish on the MacBook. If you need that Ethernet port, go with the Power Expand Plus. You get 3 USB 3.0 ports and an HDMI port with a dongle design. So between these two, you got everything you need for either of these MacBooks. So I'll leave a link down below for you so you can pick one of these up. I highly recommend it if you're gonna buy one of these MacBooks. Besides the screen sizes being different, they're roughly about the same density, so they're going to look pretty much the same. The 16-inch does have smaller bezels on the side. It exhibits a more modern design language and also just has a much bigger display. They both cover the wide color P3 color gamut and both are 500 nits in brightness, so they get plenty bright. And both have True Tone where the screen adapts to the environment around you, which I personally turn off, but some might appreciate it. But only on the 16-inch do you get the customization of refresh rate. They both have a 60 Hz refresh rate, but on the 16-inch you get some custom choices which can be good for video editing to exactly match the frame rate that you're working on. Unfortunately, both of these still have the 720p webcam. The new studio mics I think really do sound good, but the quality is still classified potato. So I hope we see better cameras on the next iterations of the MacBook Pro. So let's talk about power. The new 13-inch MacBook Pro is more powerful this year with a 10th generation Core i7 quad core, but it's nowhere near as powerful as the Core i9 8-core on the 16-inch MacBook Pro. The Core i9 is an HK processor which draws more power, but the differences in battery sizes make up for that. We are looking at a 58.2 watt-hour battery on the 13-inch versus a 100 watt-hour battery on the 16-inch. This is pretty much the biggest battery that you can fit in a laptop to take on an airplane when we used to fly. And the power brick itself is 96 watts, so not every charger will work here, but the 13-inch is less power hungry at 61 watts on the brick, so you can charge this with some power banks if you want, so that's a bonus. If you didn't know, out of these two, the 16-inch MacBook Pro is the only one that you can get with a dedicated GPU, and at this time the most powerful is the AMD Radeon Pro 5500M, and it does a decent job for sure, but by the time that you see this video, there could be a more powerful option. And it happened. Now there is a 5600M option by AMD, which uses 8 GB of HBM2 memory, which is going to be a lot faster than the performance test that I'm going to show you now. It's a $700 option, but hey, choices are choices, and I'm glad that they're there. So if you have the money, then you can order this option now. The 13-inch is limited to the integrated Intel Iris Plus graphics, but this is a big performance jump from the last generation, so I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. If you want to see how the 13-inch MacBook Pro games with Windows, I'm going to leave a link to a video my buddy Matt Monas did. He did a fantastic job on that and shows you exactly what this is capable of. But it's not all defeat for the 13-inch MacBook Pro. It does have faster RAM with 3733 MHz DDR4X RAM, but only on the high-end 13-inch MacBook Pro configuration. The middle and the base model get screwed with the slower RAM. The 16-inch MacBook Pro is equipped with 2667 MHz DDR4 RAM, but this could be way different when they refresh the 16-inch. Before we get into some video editing samples, I want to talk about the storage that's available on these two laptops. The 16-inch MacBook Pro can go up to 8 terabytes in SSD storage, which will cost you heavy, and the 13-inch also goes up to a 4 terabyte option, which will be very pricey as well, but you do have options. The speed of these discs are about the same, so both really fast storage and you will have no issues with speed. But if you look at pricing as a whole, even when you deck them out, the maxed out 13-inch version comes in at about $3,500 and the maxed out 16-inch is over $6,000, so almost half the price here. That's a big difference. So the big question is the performance of the 16-inch worth the money over the performance of the 13-inch? Well, if you're into benchmarks, you're going to see a pretty big difference. Geekbench 5 shows a much higher multi-core score, over 6400 on the MacBook Pro 16-inch as expected compared to the MacBook Pro 13-inch, which does have a very respectable 4770, but the 13-inch has a much better single-core score of 1321 over the 16-inch's 1041. So on general usage and day-to-day stuff, you're probably not going to notice a big difference, but if you're going to use one of these laptops for professional work, it can make a difference. Let's do Cinebench first. The 8 cores really help here on the 16-inch MacBook Pro with a score of 3360, while the quad-core i7 on the 13-inch gets 1909, so that again shows a significant bump in CPU capability, so that is something to consider. Having a dedicated GPU also helps in performance. The OpenCL score of the improved graphics on the 13-inch is 8635, which is a huge jump over the previous generation, but no match for the 16-inch with the AMD Radeon Pro 5500M. That's 25,964. That's 3 times the potential performance. Nobody really games on a Mac, but here's Unigine Heaven to test the GPU performance, and you can see just how much smoother the 16-inch is. So when it comes to graphically intensive tasks, the 16-inch is still the way to go. So what about real world performance? While I don't do a lot of photography work, Max Tech did an awesome video on Photoshop testing and also goes into more depth of the tests that I'm doing right now. So I'll leave a link to that video. Go watch it. It looks like it didn't have much impact on photo editing because most photo editors use the CPU more than the GPU. So if you're a photographer and you want something powerful but in a smaller form factor, then the 13-inch MacBook Pro is probably the way to go. But what I do know is video editing, so can you edit video on the 13-inch MacBook Pro? And the short answer is yes, it just depends on what you're doing with it. If you're editing 4K footage, then the 13-inch is going to be a decent choice. The scrubbing and playback of 4K footage is really smooth, so I think a lot of people will actually be happy with this, but adding on some effects, stabilization, and working with plugins like tracking, you will notice that it takes longer to render. The BruceX benchmark is a decent way to measure performance on Final Cut Pro 10. On the 13-inch, it took 40 seconds to complete, and the 16-inch only took 10 seconds, so that is a dramatic difference. Let's do a quick export test of a 3-minute and 8-second 4K clip with just color correction applied. This is pre-rendered with background rendering on, and surprisingly, they're only a few seconds apart, so super impressive for the 13-inch MacBook Pro. But here's that same test with background rendering off, and you can see the difference better here. The 16-inch finishes at 1 minute and 20 seconds, and the 13-inch finishes at 1 minute and 51 seconds, but this is still impressive. Where I see the major difference is where it involves more GPU intensive processes like adding stabilization. This is a 12.5 second 4K clip from my iPhone 11 Pro, and it takes 7 seconds on the 16-inch MacBook Pro and almost 19 seconds on the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and that doesn't seem like a lot in a short clip, but for fun, I took that same 3 minute and 8 second 4K clip and added stabilization to that, and the 16-inch MacBook Pro finished at 2 minutes and 7 seconds, but the 13-inch took 5 minutes and 36 seconds, which shows that clear gap. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but if you're editing anything above 4K, then definitely go for the 16-inch MacBook Pro. Just for fun, here's a short 8K Red RAW clip with 7:1 compression, and with high quality playback. Both don't do a great job, but at least the 16-inch is playing it back with skipping instead of just locking up on the 13-inch. It eventually does play back, but it's not usable. If you drop it to lower quality though, it is a much better experience on the 13, but it's still stuttering like crazy, but the 16-inch is actually playing back like a boss, so it's very impressive. Okay, so super outlandish test to differentiate the power between both of them. I decided to take this 8K clip with 7:1 compression and stretch it out to 35 seconds and exported it to H.2.64. I know this is brutal and took a long time, but this also gave me a chance to monitor what the computers were doing during export. Both of the fans were cranked up and sounded pretty loud. Take a listen. The 13-inch looks like it's running hotter at almost 100 degrees constantly, while on the 16-inch it was staying at 85, so the bigger size allows for better cooling, which makes sense. The 13-inch looks like there is more fluctuations in the frequency of the processor, where the 16-inch is holding steadier, and of course the 16-inch chipset is drawing and using more power as expected. At 10 minutes and 16 seconds, the MacBook Pro 16-inch finishes, so that's impressive actually. And to save you time, the MacBook Pro 13 finishes over 20 minutes later at 31 minutes and 44 seconds. So in this instance, that is a big gap in performance. So all of this testing and comparison aside, here's some advice. If you're just looking for raw horsepower and you want the most powerful MacBook Pro you can get, I would definitely go for the 16-inch. You have a more powerful processor, you can get more RAM, and you have a dedicated GPU. But if portability is important and you're looking for a still very powerful machine, but that limited RAM and base storage was holding you back before from buying a 13-inch MacBook Pro, then I would go ahead and go for it. But listen, I would not buy the entry-level MacBook Pro if you're thinking about editing video. Yes, you can still edit video on that base model, but I would definitely get that extra horsepower because the 10th generation Intel processor definitely makes a difference, and some more RAM would not hurt. And you only get the faster RAM on the high-end MacBook Pro 13-inch, so beware when you're picking up one of these. If you plan on using the MacBook for school or for the office with just occasional professional work, then why not save some money with the 13-inch? They can both drive the amazing 6K Apple Pro Display XDR monitor if you want to spend another $5 to $6 grand. I mean, what's money, right? Thank you for watching. I hope this helped you make a buying decision, and if it did, hit that thumbs up, for it helps a lot for the discovery of this video. Subscribe for a lot more content just like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.